This how-to guide will help you set up your LUS legal register for environment, health and safety and/or food. To use the LUS system, you have to complete a profile, and the profile creates your bespoke legislation register or registers. It also importantly allows you to create the content for the newsletters that you'll receive each month. The system takes you through a series of steps to help build your profile and therefore your legal registers. So what I'm going to do is, using the Environment Legal Register, take you through how to set up your profile. You do that by using the drop-down menu and clicking on the Legislation Register. You'll see at the top of this page there's a profile button, and by clicking on that profile button you start with the process of building your legal register. In the first instance, you need to select which jurisdiction is relevant for your activity or your sites. Remember that if you have multiple sites on the one legal register, you may want to be ticking the jurisdictions that are relevant to those sites. In this instance, I'm simply going to select the jurisdiction for England. That means that I will receive legislation in my legal register that is relevant to the UK and specific regulations just for England. By clicking Next, I'm into stage 2, and I'm able now to start using the profile or tick sheet to be able to narrow down the legislation that I'm going to see in my legal register once it's built. I start with a series of chapters, and these chapters mirror the legal register. Within each chapter are a series of tick box topics. By ticking on any one of these topics on the left-hand side, and I'll click the first one here, what happens is that any legislation relevant to the environmental permitting regime is brought into my legal register. If I'm unsure what the topic means, there are hover over buttons for each of these topics. Read through those and decide yourself whether that topic is relevant for your legislation register. The process of completing the profile simply works through these topic areas, chapter by chapter. So, for example, in the air chapter, it may be that smoke emissions are relevant as part of my business. It may be that I run a transport fleet, so I'll need to tick on transport. It may be that I have air conditioning or chiller units which use fluorinated gases, and therefore I need to tick the fluorinated gases box. Again, remember there are hover over buttons for each of these topics to give you a guide to whether you think the topic is relevant for your business. Further than that, against each of these topics, the chapter button on the right-hand side, if I click on that, provides you with the legislation that is relevant to that topic. So you can see here underneath fluorinated gases that there are 5 relevant regulations, some from Europe, some covering the United Kingdom. And by ticking the tick box on the left-hand side for the topic, it automatically brings all of the legislation through into my legal register, and that's shown by ticks on the right-hand side. At this point, if I decide based on the title alone that a particular piece of law is not relevant, I can untick it at this stage and it will not appear in my legal register. Again, for regulation, as with the topics, we provide hover over buttons that provide details of the legislation summaries that are in the legal register themselves. That gives you an idea of the content of that law and whether at this stage you feel it is relevant or not to be in your legal register. The profile continues through all of the chapters until you have completed ticking topics on the left-hand side and fine-tuning on the right-hand side with the exact regulation titles relevant to your activities. Don't worry at this stage if you're not sure exactly what each legislation is about. It's better to leave the legislation ticked as relevant. Then when you look in your legal register, you can review the summary at that stage and make a decision as to whether it's relevant or not later on. Once the profile is completed, by ticking the Next button at the bottom, it will ask you whether you want to use the department filter. Now, a department filter is an additional paid service for those companies who are using a single site register, or free as part of your subscription if you are a multi-site register user. If you enable this function at this stage, it allows you to add departments of your business into this system so that you can filter your legal register by department at a later stage. Let's assume now that we're going to leave the departments and we'll complete the profile. Even the limited number of ticks I've made on the profile, you'll see that I now have a legal register made up of the same chapters that we saw in the profile, but with a number of laws that are relevant based on that profile, leaving a number of laws that are irrelevant, i.e. not ticked as part of the profile. So just in a couple of minutes I've managed to create a bespoke legal register